you've got a car loan and you can't afford it. What can you do? The car guy, Ted Michalos, is here with the answers starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
2/3 of our clients own a vehicle at the time they file a bankruptcy or consumer proposal. Makes sense. In a lot of places, you need a car to get around. But 60% of our clients have a car loan or lease. They don't own it outright. And about 3 in 10 financed vehicles of our clients have negative equity, so you can't just sell the car and pay back the loan. So, Ted, you're the car guy here. Let us start with a discussion of negative equity. What am I talking about? How does it come about? What's the implications?
Yeah, okay. Well, there's a problem that you're not a car guy. But that's for another show, maybe.
So let's address that then. I am not a car guy. I drive a 2011 vehicle, which is, we're recording this in the year 2021.
And what were you driving when I met you?
Something much older than that.
Celebrity, I think it was.
That's possible. The greatest car I ever owned was a 1976 puke green Dodge Aspen.
It would be.
I drove it for 4 years. I paid $500 from the 80-year-old lady next door, kept parking it in her garage, shoveled her driveway. Best car I ever had.
You won't remember if it had a 390 under the hood or if it was just a straight six-piece.
Oh, yeah. It did not have a 390 under the hood. It took a while to get going. So, okay. Well, it's okay. Tell me a car story then. I've told you my car story. So you, as some people may or may not know, like to race them.
That's true.
So, but you race old cars.
Really old cars. So like the oldest car I have is a 1938 MG. So that's a really old car. You can't do anything useful with it. Now, the oldest car I race is from 1955. So again, it's not anything useful. I mean, I originally, when I was 16, I lived in the country. And so it was either a 45-minute bus ride to school or get a car. So my first car was a little Austin Mini. And I've had a bunch of them over the years. So, I mean, the car itself doesn't matter so much as having the car because it represents freedom. It represents movement. You got more control of your life. That's what, car guys like.
And I would assume an Austin Mini is fantastic in the winter, is it?
Better than you might think because it weighs nothing. It's front wheel drive. All of the weight is over the front wheels because that's where the engine is. I mean, actually, they were pretty good little cars.
So there you go. Buy an Austin Mini. Then.
Yeah, you can't find them anymore.
And they're no doubt good in gas. So, okay. So we have established that you understand what a car is. So that's good. So let's talk negative equity then. What is negative equity?
So if your car is financed, you owe money against it, and you owe more than it's worth, well, that's negative equity. So for whatever reason, just about everyone that we talk to has about $10,000 worth of negative equity in their car. So it doesn't matter if you got the car last week, you've been making payments on it for 3 years. Once you figure out what the car is actually worth, what you still owe on the debt, and all the legal costs and things they're going to add, you end up owing about $10,000.
Yeah. So you bought the car. There's still, $30,000 owing on the loan. But if you were to sell the car today, you would get maybe $20,000 for it.
That's right. I mean, an average car depreciates 20% just driving it off the lot. A lot of cars depreciate 30% driving them off the lot. And what's worse, you've got all these damn companies now financing cars for 6, 7, even 8 years. And so if you're financing a car over 8 years, probably the first 5 years, you owe more than the car is worth, even if you're just barely using it. So you're right from day one, you owe more than the car is worth, and it stays that way till you've had it for 5 of those 7 years.
And that assumes that nothing goes wrong.
That's right.
You don't have an accident, nothing.
Any kind of major repair, because, your warranty is going to run out after 3 years.
Yeah.
And now you're on the hook for that new transition, for that head gasket. You got to remember that cars need maintenance. We'll leave that conversation. I'm thinking all the people that they get a 3-year lease and so they don't do any maintenance because they're getting rid of the car in 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's clearly a problem as well.
It's just scary. I think that's my sister.
And if she's watching. And the problem, I guess you got more than one sister.
That's right. So I'm safe.
Confusing as to who he's talking about. And the part of the reason that it's always a $10,000 shortfall,
right.
And it always is. Like, it doesn't matter. I don't need to see any of the paperwork. If you're handing your car back, I know that eventually it's going to be $10,000. Right. Part of that's because tax is built into it, right?
Correct.
So I buy the car for $20,000, but I have to pay $20,000 plus HST and whatever else they tack onto it.
Right.
But if I was to the next day sell the car and I was able to get the full price for it, I'm still only getting $20,000, not the HST or anything.
Correct.
So you're guaranteed to be in a shortfall
automatically
position.
going to lose 13%. Now, if you trade it in, they use the trade-in value to offset the purchase price, so you pay that much less HST, which is why if you sell a car privately, you have to sell it for more than they give you as a trade-in. But again, that's a different conversation.
Well, and have you ever had a client who has traded in multiple cars and the negative equity has just continued to balloon?
We see that all the time. In fact, literally 10 minutes before we recorded this, I was on the phone with somebody that she's got $10,000 worth of negative equity. And her plan was, before talking to me, well, I'm just going to go trade it in so I can get a smaller car that'll cost me less. I said, well, that would work, except for that new car is going to cost you the new car price plus the negative equity from the old car. So your payment's going to be the same or higher for less car.
Yeah, you're paying $10,000 more. That's what rolling the negative equity is.
For nothing.
And the car dealers will do that?
Well, because the car dealers make commission on the sale, but they also make commission on how much they finance. And so I'm selling a car for $20,000, but I have to finance 30 because of the negative equity on the last car. I get profit based on the 20 plus on that extra 10. And then I'm going to sell you a long-term equity for warranty for even more and make more money on that. So, but that's a different conversation.
So there are costs associated with having a car. So why then do we own cars? I mean, or why do we not just all drive old junkers?
Well, it becomes a balancing act, too. If you drive an old junker, you have the risk of anticipated or worse, unanticipated maintenance and repair. So you know at some point a car is going to start to need some major service on the engine. The first couple of years now, maybe you got to have oil changes every 6 months, depending on how much you're driving. Somewhere around year 4, you're going to have to start changing timing belts. You're going to have to do some major work on the transmission. You're certainly going to have to upgrade your brakes, buy a new set of tires. At some point, it becomes very expensive from a maintenance perspective. The older your car, well, so let's say I've got a 5 or 6 year old car. I spend the money on a new set of tires. I do all this work on my engine. Now I need to keep it for another 4 or 5 years to justify having spent all that money. And it's just the law of averages. Sooner or later, something's going to break.
And what kind of numbers are we talking about? So let's say I'm driving, like me, not a great car. It's an old car.
Actually, yours a very dependable old car.
Well, it's because I've had it for 10 years.
Right.
And I'm not going to tell you what brand it is because they don't sponsor this show. So if they want to sponsor the show, then I will put in a plug for
I'll give you a list of cars companies that could sponsor the show.
Yeah,
anyway.
There you go. So what would a set of tires cost? Like not the fanciest high performance, but what's just, tires?
Well, so a typical tire now for an average, I don't know, a $20,000 car, a Honda, Hyundai, something like that, probably you're looking at $100 to $150 a tire. So if you need 4, $500 to $600, plus you got to spend another $100 to mount them. And probably they're going to suggest that you buy winter tires as well as summer tires, so maybe you got to double that.
Yeah, and winter tires are obviously going to extend the life of your tires because I'm using those, but then I'm probably going to want to buy rims as well.
If you're running a sport ute or a truck, the tires are bigger, the cost goes up accordingly, right?
And if I'm driving, what does someone drive, 20,000 kilometers a year?
That's what they say call average.
So how long do tires last?
So you should be able to get 3 or 4 years out of that unless you've got a really heavy foot.
So, okay. So let's say I get 3 years out of it and it costs $150 a tire. Mm-hmm. Then it's going to cost me, just the cost of tires alone is a couple $100 a year.
That's what you need to factor in. Yep. And you got to assume that on 20,000 kilometers, probably your car needs 3 oil changes in a year, maybe 2 if you're buying the expensive synthetic oils. So an oil change is going to cost you somewhere between $100 and the expensive ones, the synthetics, $500. So factor in a couple of those every year.
And then there's going to be stuff that as the car gets older needs to be fixed, like you said.
Well, it just naturally wears out, right? Windshield wipers, you're going to end up doing them every couple of years. And at some point, you've got to start doing major overhauls, replacing the leads to the spark plugs. All the filters in the car need to be changed. I mean, it starts to add up.
So if I have a 3, 4, 5-year-old car, then my maintenance costs can easily be
a couple of grand
a year.
Yep. And on top of that, now we haven't talked about insurance.
Let's talk about insurance.
Well, and so cars are insured for their value and how likely they are to be stolen and how easily unavailable spare parts are. So, a North American small car, pick something, a Ford Fusion, a Chevy Cruze or something like that. Parts are available. The parts are not expensive. They're not likely to be stolen because who the hell wants one?
Sorry to all you Ford Fusion.
So the insurance for that type of vehicle is not so high. insurance for the things that are high theft items. So interestingly enough, cars like Honda Accords are high theft items. Toyota Camrys are high theft. So the more likely a car is to be stolen, the more expensive your insurance gets. And anything that's come here from overseas, it's going to cost more to insure because the parts are more expensive.
So if I'm driving my car to work every day, and let's assume we're not in lockdown, we're actually going to the office,
yep.
and that's how I'm getting to my 20,000 kilometers a year, what should I be budgeting for car expenses? So let's assume that
let's assume you're getting a reasonable fuel economy. So you're spending, if you're getting 20,000 kilometers a year, probably you're spending $300 a month on fuel. So let's go $300 on fuel. Let's say $200 a month on maintenance and repairs. And this is for a car that's anywhere from 3 to 6 years old. Let's put in there, let's say that you're not under 25, so that your insurance is probably costing you, again, another $200 a month. So that's got no car payment in it, but that's $700 is what it costs you just to drive the damn thing.
And then if my car payment could easily be $400.
Yeah, it's probably $500 or $600 is a better bet.
So I could easily be spending $1,200 a month
on a car.
Yep.
Now, if you compare that, you can't, $1,200 worth of Uber or cabs probably wouldn't get you to work every day. You could save money by mass transit if you could get it, and I'm not sure you want to get on it right now with COVID, so it gets more complicated.
Yeah, and I guess it depends obviously where you're living. If you're living in a city, well, okay, I can get on a bus or I can walk or I can ride my bike or whatever. If you're living out in the boonies or if your shift starts at 5 a.m.
right
at the factory or the warehouse, then it's a little bit more difficult. So that kind of explains how you can get into a negative equity situation, and it explains what the costs are. And do you think people are aware of what it actually costs?
Well, I think people are, they simplify things. They don't think of how much it costs to operate the car. This is how much payment I can afford. And the dealerships all play into that psychology. So do you get paid biweekly? Well, this would be your biweekly payment. They match it and they thereby reduce it. The deals you see out there for no interest, that sort of stuff. Well, it's built into the cost of the car anyway. So you don't have any power anytime you're buying a car. The guy you're dealing with on the other side of the table does this for a living. He closes 4 or 5 deals a day if he's lucky, and you do it once every 3 or 4 years. Houses are worse, but cars they affect more people, so it's more insidious. You're going to lose this deal because the guy at the other side of the table does this for a living.
And so when you're meeting with a client, do you find that the whole psychology of a car is something that, you know what, I understand, you've explained it to me, it cost me $1,200 a month, which is like one of my paychecks.
Right.
But I'm still going to keep the car because of, psychological reasons.
I got to have the car. For whatever reason. We live in a culture. I'm a victim of this. You got to have a car. When I got out of school, so I went to university for the first time. 8 months after being in school, I'd used up the savings for university. So it was, you want to come next semester, you got to sell your car. Well, the hell with that. I quit and got a job.
That's the spirit.
Didn't go back to school for 5 years.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't going to sell my car.
And is that a guy thing?
No, it isn't. It used to be a guy thing. But now you watch TV, there's all sorts of advertising focused at women because they have the exact same concerns that we do. You got to get to that job at 5 o'clock in the morning, or the convenience of it. Cars are, they provide a level of freedom. They give you the illusion of control over your life. You can go where you want, when you want. You can put what you want in it. You're in charge of this thing, and it empowers you to do other things.
Yeah, and I don't want to imply that it's entirely psychological because if I have a young kid and I have to, drop my kid off at daycare, I've got to get to work, I want a reliable vehicle. I don't want something that's going to, crap out in the middle of the highway somewhere.
Right.
So, but there is certainly a psychological impact to it. And I think that's why everyone has to ask themselves, okay, is this car a consumer good, like a toothbrush?
Yeah.
Or is it something that is for my self-worth?
Mm-hmm. What you're really asking is, how much car do you need? How much car can you afford? And those are pretty important questions when people come to see us, because just about everybody wants to keep their car. And I certainly agree with that logic. But you need a car, not necessarily the car you have now. And particularly if you got $10,000 worth of negative equity, that means you're paying more than what the damn thing is worth.
So let's get back to negative equity then.
Right.
You're sitting down with someone in your office and you go through the numbers and they go, yeah, you know what? I get it. It's costing me $1,200 a month, which I can't really afford. And I'm in the whole $10,000.
Right.
So I could keep paying on the car loan. I will, the next $10,000 I pay gets me nothing because I'm just getting myself back to even. So, okay, one option is keep paying. Another option is give the car back.
That's right.
Under what circumstances would you advise someone to surrender the car back to the lender?
Well, so after we've had the conversation of, do you really need this car? The next conversation is, how much car do you need? Have you given any thought to that? And so I recommend to them that they, as ridiculous as this sounds, maybe they go car shopping. So there are people that specialize in financing folks in financial distress. They know that you're not going to have a trade-in. They're not going to get any kind of rollover. They know that you're looking for the most manageable monthly payment, something that fits in your budget because things are very difficult for you. And so they figure out how much car they can afford and build towards it that way. And then it's a question of, well, what do we do with the old car?
That's an excellent question. What do we do with the old car? So I'm in a situation now where I've got $10,000 of negative equity.
Yep.
And so I decide, you know what? I'm going to give the car up. And perhaps I've done what you suggested. I went car shopping. I found a car place that will finance a used car for me.
At a reasonable rate. Be careful.
Yeah. And I guess even if the rate isn't reasonable, if it's a $5,000 or $10,000 car, my loan payments are presumably going to be less than the $30,000 car I own with a $40,000 loan because of my negative equity.
Right.
So, okay, I decide I'm going to replace it with this new, cheaper car, and maybe I can find a used car. Maybe a family member can give me one to use or whatever.
Yep.
So how do I give my car back?
So there are a couple of options. So there are examples where it makes sense for you to, you've got a relationship with a dealer that you've used in the past, and maybe they're going to help you with the new car because you've used financing, but you still want to get this brand, you want to deal with this guy. Some of them will just let you park the car there and they'll deal with it for you. In other examples, you simply detail on your paperwork, yes, I'm going to surrender this vehicle. So it's part of your consumer proposal, your bankruptcy, you're going to return the vehicle. We put that on the paperwork. Sometime within a couple of weeks of you filing, the car company will call you and say, all right, when can we come and get your car? The good side or the benefit to this is you can keep driving it as long as you keep insurance on it till they come pick it up. The downside, of course, is you've got this car parking that you don't want anymore, and it reminds you that you're getting rid of it. So in most cases, it's better to get rid of it as quickly as you can. Get into the new one if that's what you're going to do, however you're getting the new one.
Yeah, drive it back to the dealership or to the bank or whatever. So now you mentioned if I'm filing a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, then the shortfall will be included. What if I'm not? What if I just want to give up my car?
Well, and so if you're not, the strategies that people try. So the first is, well, can I sell it to get enough to pay off the loan? Well, we've already established that you can't do that. You're going to have this $10,000 that you likely owe when the car is sold, however it's sold. And then you've got to find a way to pay that $10,000. Likely they'll let you do monthly payments at the same interest rate, but so now you're making a monthly payment for nothing. Like the car's gone. There are companies out there that, lease busters and that sort of thing where they will find somebody to take over your payments. The risk with those strategies are, one, if that other person defaults, the debt's still yours. If they destroy the car and they're not insured properly, the debt's still yours. And at the end of the day, when the lease or financing runs out, they've made all the payments, there still could be some sort of shortfall because of mileage or other costs that you have to pay. So that's not a great strategy. I mean, if you've got a shortfall on a car, you are stuck. You either have to find a way to pay it, or we're going to include it in a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy. And
so I guess if you have other debts, then that will make the decision easier.
It will. The surprise for folks when we tell them that the shortfall is almost always $10,000 is, so they think they owe $20,000 in credit cards. Well, we explain, well, you also owe this $10,000 on the card. It's really $30,000 that you owe. It makes the argument, though, for proposal or bankruptcy more compelling because the debts are that much larger. You don't think of them that way.
Yeah, and so we are advocates of looking at the whole picture.
You have to because, well, let's say you decide, it's worth your money to keep the car. And so you've got that $1,200 a month that we already estimated. And no matter what we do to solve your other debt problems, you've still got this $1,200 a month commitment that is going to be with you going forward. And it might make the whole thing fall apart. Because you've decided to stick with that old car and the higher payments, it may be that the plan we come up with isn't going to be sustainable for you.
Yeah, whatever you can do to get your monthly cost down, the more freedom and flexibility then you have.
Right. I mean, and anytime you file a proposal or bankruptcy, there's a definite date that these things start. And so we clean up your finances as much as possible for that date. If you decide to keep the old car and keep making payments on it for 2 or 3 months, you can't change your mind. So you got to give this a lot of thought, and we'll make sure that you properly consider. Keep it, don't keep it, surrender it back. How are you going to deal with it? It's a big part of the picture because cars are such a big part of so many people's lives.
Yeah, and the discussion I'll often have with people is, well, okay, it's costing you $1,200 a month to have this car. Could you survive without a car for 6 months?
Right.
Can you take the bus? Can you bum a ride off a friend who works where you are? If it's the summer, can you ride your bike, do something?
Can you learn to live a different way?
Because over a 6-month period, if you can save up $5,000 or $6,000, then you may be able to go out and buy a $5,000 or $6,000 used car.
That's right.
And then you're off to the races. So.
Well, or at the you might use that as a down payment, so you don't have the immediate negative equity built in. If you're putting money down on a car, you're already addressing some of the fact that it's going to be worth less as soon as you drive it off the lot.
Yeah, if you buy a $20,000 car with a $10,000 down payment, you don't have negative equity. You might only be even, but you right. don't have any negative equity. So if I surrender the car back to the lender, what is the process from there?
All right, so the lender is going to probably send you a letter saying you're now in default on your loan. This is the amount you need to do to bring it current, or we will sell the vehicle. That's what they're supposed to do under the Personal Property Security Act in Ontario. They basically have to tell you, this is how much you owe us. This is what you have to be able to do to redeem the car, or we're going to sell it. When they sell it, they have to sell it in what's considered a commercially reasonable manner. Now, unfortunately, what that means is they're going to send it to the car auction. The car auction is the wholesale price less maybe 10 or 15%. And so your car, which you owe $20,000 on, which you thought was worth maybe $15,000, goes across the auction at $7,500. And that's, again, one of these areas, that's why the negative equity comes across.
Yeah, we have this vision that, well, I'll take my car back to the dealer and they'll put it on the lot and sell it.
Yep.
That's not always the way it happens.
That's right.
In fact, it's almost never the way it happens.
And that happens to everybody. I mean, I got my wife a car last year that she didn't like. And I said to the dealer, well, we got to do something with this. And the numbers they started quoting me, I well, that's not going to work. I'm now driving the car.
Yeah. I love that car.
Yeah.
And that's why Ted is driving a Ford Fiesta. So, and the auto auction, I mean, how do they work? It's like once a month, every 2 weeks, something like that?
It depends on activity, but usually they're once a week, Wednesday or Thursday. And literally the cars, you may have seen them on TV. They just go across the block and people bid on them as they go across.
And so if it happens to be a Wednesday in the middle of a snowstorm when no one shows up at the auction,
right.
then my $20,000 car might very easily sell for $5,000.
Or if it's a day that, well, last month we took in 50 lease cars and they're all going across the same time too, the price is going to be driven down that way.
So, yeah.
You got no control over an auction.
Right. So if you can sell it privately, you can probably get more, but then you've got to have the bank on side because there's still the shortfall.
Right. Now, you can sell it privately and then turn around and put the shortfall in a proposal or a bankruptcy yourself as well. You've got to decide, is it worth the effort to try and do that?
Well, and
it could be.
In order to sell it, the lien has to be removed.
Correct.
And that's not a simple matter.
Yeah. They're not likely to cooperate. Well, it's not a simple matter. That's the short answer.
Yeah, they may or may not. But so, okay, let's wrap it up here then with the overall thought process then. So somebody is sitting down or somebody listening to us right now.
Yep.
They own a car that has financing against it. Maybe they're not driving it as much as they used to because, they're working from home now. Maybe they found other ways to live. They would like to get rid of it.
Right.
What is the thought process then?
So the first question is, how much car do you need? And the answer may be, I don't need a car at all, or I need less of a car. I can get by with an older car. Then the second is, what do I do with the car that I have? Can I sell it privately to recover the money? Probably I'm going to end up with negative equity. Have I got other debts? Do I need to find a more universal solution to all of my financial problems? Maybe I need to look at a proposal or bankruptcy. Each person's situation is unique. I mean, we see literally hundreds of these every month, so we've got a much broader perspective than people. But it has to be tailored to your own situation. There isn't a standard answer that I can just tell you right now, well, this is what you're going to do. because it's different for everybody.
Yeah, and there's two components. There's the money, but there's also the psychology, the freedom.
There's the need, the need versus the want, right? So how much do you need? How much do you want? The want is what gets us in trouble. The need, you may determine that you don't need a car at all.
Well, and I suggest to people, try living without your car for a day.
Yeah.
Like, see what it would be like to take the bus to work.
And if you can do it for a day, do it for a week.
Yeah. And see, and it may be that, no, I just cannot do it. There's no way I can, the buses don't start running till 6 a.m. and I got to be at the warehouse by 5. So, okay, then we know that you have to have a car. But you made the point, you need a car, not this car.
That's right.
And then you've got to walk through all the options.
And that's the big mindset. Well, and this may come across as a little bit crazy, but some of the folks I talk to, I tell them they got to go looking for a car. It puts a positive spin on this because everybody likes getting a new car. Even if it's a used car, I like getting something different.
And that's a good way to look at it.
Yep.
Look at all your debts, decide whether it makes sense to do something more formal. If you've got a lot of other debts, then maybe a consumer proposal or bankruptcy is necessary. Otherwise, perhaps you can deal with it on your own.
Right.
Excellent, Ted. Thank you very much. Most people who file a bankruptcy or proposal with us end up keeping their car. And that makes sense if there's no loan or if the loan is affordable. But if it's too expensive, you got to consider giving it up. So
right.
That's our show for today. Thanks for listening. Until next week, for Doug Hoyes. No, I'm Doug Hoyes. For Ted Michalos, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.